All right, guys, welcome back. I dressed up for you. These webisodes are supposed to be me and you in my shop, and this is pretty much how it is. I don't think I own a shirt that isn't covered in glue and stain and everything else. And I don't even know what this football jersey is, and I don't care. I bought it cheap and it's comfortable. We're not here to entertain, but I think you done figured that out, huh? All right, out on the forum, and there's a lot more people subscribed to this than are on the forum. And I hope even if you're not a member of the forum, that you're at least paying attention to it, because this is where questions after the shows and after the fact gets answered. Also on the forum, Jeff Fleischer has been kind enough to come over, and he's taken pictures of all this stuff, stills, and putting them up on the forum so that we make sure all the questions are answered as we go. Now, one of the questions had to do with the expansion and contraction of this big case. And I want to address that a little bit. What we've got, the grain in our shelves is running this way. And the grain in our sides, of course, but the way a panel expands is it expands across its width. It doesn't grow. It expands this way. The shelves are going to do the same thing. Now, the grain in this is running in the same direction. So it's not a big deal. Now, when we put this together for the final, we're going to glue back about 2 or 3 inches on the front of the shelf to the case. That locks the front and forces all the movement to go to the back, because we don't want this point changing. Okay. The other thing is that if you notice, when I told you and we drilled these holes for the screws to go through, the screw, this will allow that screw sitting in there to be able to move. So we have 2 things happening. One, we have our grain going all in the same direction. So it's going to move together. The second thing is, because it's on an angle, if it wants to move just a little bit adverse one to the other, the screw holes will allow that. But there's another thing we're going to do. When we put this together, except for the area in the front of the shelves that we're going to be gluing, we're going to seal the end of all the end grain in the shelves. And when we finish this, we finish everything. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, there's a lot of controversy out here whether that's necessary or not. In my world, it's not even a question. We finish everything. And I will tell you this. I have built cases and I've built projects that's got massive 1-board sides or big, huge 2-board sides, big, massive tabletops. I've never had an issue. I've never had a problem. But there's several things. One is, in this case, my poplar is good and dry. I skim planed it, let it set, acclimate. That makes, now to understand that, and I may have explained this, but I'm going to explain it again. When kiln drying wood is like baking bread. It's the best analogy I know. Or baking a cake. No matter what you do, the outside is going to get more done than the inside. It's like frying chicken. You want the outside crispy and the inside done, but still moist. Well, kiln drying wood, you want it equal all the way through. But think about this a minute. And you heard me mention in a past episode, website, yeah, I got it, about covering your pieces, your panels, and putting them in a plastic bag. Well, if you go to the store and you buy a loaf of bread, it's in a plastic bag. And when you open it up, it's still moist. The moisture can't get out. If you take that same piece of bread and you lay it out on the counter and you just leave it lay there, that piece of bread will get hard and dry. And it will do that equally. The same thing if you bake a loaf of bread or a cake. And let's think about taking a knife and cutting the crust off of it, the same as skim planing. We remove the crust. And you take that hunk of bread and you leave it set out. That hunk of bread, in not too long a time, will equalize itself. It will become dry and crisp, dry and hard all the way throughout. The same thing applies to wood. The term we use for that is acclimating. We skim plane it, get the crust off, then we let the wood just set around and it will equalize itself. That's a good thing. That's a smart thing. Because what it does is it helps keep your wood stable. And it reduces expansion and contraction. Now, like I said, the majority of moisture that is absorbed and released through wood happens in the end grain. I don't know if you call them capillaries or whatever you call them, but vertically, and you know, you can take red oak and you can take and pour water on the end of it, and it'll run out the other end. Red oak and ash and some of these, you know, coarse grain woods, man, you can almost look through some of the capillaries in this thing. So all of that said to say, if you go to a mill and you buy your wood rough cut, first thing you're going to notice is they've either painted the ends of it, or you will notice little teeny cracks in here. Now the first thing is you never call them a crack. A crack is a kind of harsh. They're referred to as a check. And they're referred to as a seasoning check. And it's pretty much a given that you're going to chop the end off all of these, every one. Because it's going to crack a little bit in here. And that's because it's drying out the most through the end grains. So sealing the end grains is important. Now you can take, you know, just a little bit of shellac and go down the edge of it. Now of course if you're going to be gluing it, it's not necessary because the glue is going to seal it. And you could also take just a little bit of glue and wipe down that end grain edge of that shelf and let it dry, let it harden. That's important. You know, behind me right here is a big cabinet that's got a lot of raised panels in it. Every one of those raised panels, inside of here, the end grains are sealed. Every one of them. Reduces my expansion and contraction. You know, this may be something you've never heard of. But it's just, for me, it's just common sense, you know. And all I can tell you is I've done a ton of stuff with a lot of big boards. And yeah, not a problem yet. So it works. It works. Acclimate your wood, seal your end grains, and make allowances for that expansion and contraction. That's good woodworking. That's smart woodworking. Okay, and you know, it's just like this segment we're doing right now. All of my maple and everything has been back here until I got back to this. And if you look very carefully, you can see I've already untaped these. But you can see where I had it all taped nicely together. and kept everything taped up so that things couldn't move. And even then I can get a little bit. Let me show you this. See this right here? I've got a little bit. If I hadn't had it taped, I'd have had a whole lot more. Yeah. Now that's going to be okay, because when we get to making this, we're going to be cutting this in half, and it'll lay down and we'll be able to work with it. Now Tiger Maple is a little different because of all the figure in it going across it. This way, it can change in length. I know I hear you do what? You're nuts. No, I'm not. I built a door for a guy who's a big wood dealer. Anyway, and the door I built, the outside of it was ash. It was crotch ash. And the other side of the door was Tiger Maple. So I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you what I did. I laminated two together, and I put a little thin piece in the middle. You know, you don't glue one to, you want a triple lamination, not a double. Before I could even get the door, before I even got to the pieces, these things twisted and gnarled up. Oh my goodness. It was a mess. I had to start over. So I wound up building a door that I had 1 3/4 thick door out of ash and one out of Tiger Maple. And what I wound up doing was cutting grooves on the back side and putting sliding dovetails in it, but I made the door work each door work independent of each other. And you can go at any given time, and that Tiger Maple door will either be above the ash or below the ash, but it moves. It does do it. A little bit. But in a big door, that little bit was enough to... So it will move a little bit. But letting it acclimate, getting it skimmed down, getting that crust off a little bit, then let it do its thing. Then you come back and process it till it's straight in your final dimensions. That's the way you deal with wood. Don't go out here and buy a bunch of wood, come home, slam it through a planer, and start building. Give it a chance to acclimate. Give that loaf of bread a chance to dry out thoroughly all the way through. Then you have a stable thing. Might not be good eating for the bread, but it's good for the wood. Okay, all of that explained. We're going to go, and last time we made all of our moldings so that we had a physical, actual piece to build from, so we made sure we didn't have any errors. Now we're going to go ahead and make the crown for the very same reason. All right, guys, we're going to make this crown. Now, this is the piece that we're going to ultimately come up with. Now the bit, we all have seen where you can put these across the table saw on an angle and use your table saw to cove it. I did that for years, but man, that sure makes for a mess of sand. And particularly on this high-figured maple, it's not fun. These are it's a dome-shaped bit. I don't know who all has them. I'm not here to do a commercial. I get them from Eagle America, and it's eagleamerica.com router bits. And they come in all kind of different sizes. And I'm going to tell you, they do a super nice job. And you can see the object of the game here will be to dish this. Now, is it going to give you a surface that you're not going to have to sand or scrape? Nope. But it does a nice job. Okay. So this is, in this case, I'm using the large one. And just for reference, the large one is 2 3/4, I think, across it. I'm kind of somewhere around there. About 2 3/4. Okay. And the other thing, the other day I was showing you, and I had my hand in front of the camera. The goop on these things builds up in your cut edge, right here. And it gets up on the top, and that's what dulls them. All right, Crystal, hold your ears. She can't stand to hear this file. Just rest. And all I do is I take one of these little diamond hones, and this is a coarse one, because this carbite's tough. And I simply clean it, again, a little goof off, and make sure, and that's nice and sharp. Now, the way you tell if a router bit's sharp enough to cut, just so you know, is when you can take it and you can make shavings on your fingernail. That's getting that stain off. I'm going to come right back and show you something else. We're making bracket feet, and we'll be getting to these in some other project. This bit can also be used to scoop your material out for your bracket feet. Does a neat job. Okay. So I'm going to get this loaded up and set up, and we'll get to making those. I want to mention something. Y'all notice this bearing on here? I put that on there. That doesn't have anything to do with this particular operation. I don't know why I put it on there. I don't recall. But it was something. Don't ask if I need a toolbox to hold my router bits. Don't ask. It's some other stuff in there, styrofoam. Push them down in. You've been doing this stuff as long as I have. You acquire a few. Now, one of the things, don't try to take a big path out of this, or a heavy cut. Not a good idea. I've got my fence set. What I did, now this is going to be my crown, and this crown is going to be 3 inches, I believe, across it. Yep. Okay. But my blank at the moment is 3 1/4. That, I mean, I'm going to be coming back and we're going to be cutting this 45 and then these on the face, so I can cut it down once I've ran it. But the way you want to line this up, if you look at this bit, I don't know if you can see that real good. If you look at this bit, see this point right here where the 2 blades come in? Right there, that's your center. Simply make yourself a center point. Did you get that? Zoom. Okay. Then line it up with the center part of your material, and you have it. Now, I've run these a lot. One of the things, I want to show you something. as this bit is rotating, it's cutting on this surface and it's also cutting here. So it's a push-pull, meaning that what it's going to do is it can try to push itself away from the fence. And that's not a good thing. But as long as you can put a feather board in there, and I may just do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Just to be safe. That makes sense. All right, and like I said, don't make heavy cuts, and that's a lot of cut there. I think I'm going to get a push pad on this thing. One of the things I forgot to tell you on this bit also, it can try to pull it. Try to pull it out of your hand, pulling that way, so hold on. Because it's a climb cut or a tracking cut, any way you do it, but it sure does a nice job. Just be careful with it. And I'm going to tighten this feather board up just a little bit more, and that helps. And don't let nobody stand straight ahead of you. He'll miss you, Chris. You're all right. Now you just seen me hone that bit up nice and sharp, but you see I'm still getting the burn. And if you notice as I'm going through, those pauses, just a pause. Highly figured tiger maple, sometimes it has a lot of mineral in it. Cherry, all of them. That will happen. When we get done running it, what we will do is make just a little teeny cut, raise the bit just a little bit, and make one nice smooth pass down through and clean it out. All right, you noticed I flipped it around. That makes sure that I'm dead center. Now I'm going to do that little sanding pass. That's all I want. All right, I still got a little teeny bit of burn. I've also got some mineral built up on the edges here. Probably should have cleaned that bed a little bit before I made that last pass, but it's going to be all right. Now we're going to go to the table saw and make a crown. What we got to do now is we're going to cut the two outside edges right here. Okay? Now why am I doing that now instead of doing the back? Well, the reason I'm going to do it is that's going to give me a little bit more stable platform to run on. Now, an alternative to using the table saw would be to use a 45-degree router bit. Now, because there's a lot of let me show you that real quick. It's just a big 45-degree. And I've used them a time or 50. Now let's talk about table saws just a minute. And what I want to talk about is left tilt, right tilt. Now, this is a left tilt. Obviously the blade leans to the left. Right tilts goes the other way. Now here's where the big difference comes in right now. When you're cutting this, if you will look carefully, as I'm cutting, the scrap is going to fall away from the blade. And I'm able to cut it with my finished side up. That means that these teeth are coming down into the wood. In other words, they're cutting down into it. That gives me the cleanest cut on top. It's kind of like an upcut, downcut router bit. A downcut is shearing down this way, so if there's going to be any chip out, it's going to be on the bottom. A right tilt doesn't do that. A right tilt, we have to cut it with our face down because our blade is now leaning this way. And I know a lot of you have right tilts. That's why I want to talk about the router bit a little bit. The problem with a right tilt coming this way is, again, that blade laying this way. As I come through here, I've got a blade spinning coming this way. So you definitely want a good push stick and you want to be careful. The other problem is that it's then going to be shearing to my face side. The other problem with it is that the offall or the scrap, as I move through, if you can think about this a minute, here's a piece. The scrap, as it comes off, it's going to be laying on top. When it's cutting this way, it's going to be laying, the scrap is going to be laying on top of the saw blade when you finish the cut. And that's just a good way to get a good kickback and get smacked pretty good. So what do? Very simple. You sneak up on it. You run it in small increments to where the only thing coming off that blade is sawdust. You don't want to be bringing strips off because Because that blade, again, is setting on this angle, that scrap's going to fall down and those teeth can grab it and throw it right back at you. So by doing it just a little bit and a little bit, there's nothing for it to throw. Okay? So here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my face and I'm just going to nibble it away until I come up at my point at 3 inches. You know what I think is going to be easier for me to do to show you? Is we're just going to go to 3 inches. It's not going to matter. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm at 3 1/4. So to be equal on both sides, I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut it 3 1/8 and then 3. Let me rip it. Okay, every now and then you want to do a really good test to make sure that your blade is setting at 45. And that's one of those little digital things. But you can also, if you take your miter slide, something you know is accurate, cut you a 45 and lay it on your table to make sure. Because sometimes sawdust can get in your mechanism or between or inside the table saw. There's an adjustable bolt that acts as a stop to stop it dead on 45. If you get some sawdust in between there, you're not going to be on 45. Okay, what I want to do is I want to come in right on this corner, right at the edge of that little, where you see this die, right here. So what I did was I marked it, but I'm going to ease into it. I'm set out just a little white further than what I need to be, because again, I like that skim, that final cut. I always like to take just a thin cut. That gives me the cleanest, smoothest edge. That's actually good. Now, let me caution you on something. When you come through, because you're actually removing a little bit of that bottom portion, as you come through, when you get to the end, this can try to drop on you just a little bit on the very end. Be aware of that. And that's another reason for just making it longer than what you're going to need. Now with that done, what I want to do is I want to even this up, and I want this face to be about 1/4 inch. So again, I'm going to sneak up on it. I did something because I want to show you this. If you look at my molding, I'm too wide in here, a lot wider than what I want to be. I could actually cut this back to make it that quarter. But if I do that, then what's going to happen is my width is going to change. So instead of being 3, I'm probably going to wind up being 2 3/4, or maybe just a little bit more than that. So what can I do? Well, I'm going to show you. And that's the reason I did that. Now you see, it's all fine and dandy, and life is good when everything comes out perfect. But that don't happen in many cases. So learning how to recover from issues, that's a good thing. So what I did, remember when I first ran this, I was at 3 1/4 inches. I cut it down to 3, and I did my angles. So what I've done now is I took my 3 inches and I remarked my center. And I moved the fence to be centered again at 3 inches. Now I'm just simply going to come in here, reset my featherboard a little bit. Now the first thing I can do is I can go a little deeper. So let's see how that works out for us. It's a little better. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise it just a little bit. And I'm going to take this fence and I'm going to do a side-to-side cut. Let me show you. I'm going to move this in about my fence in about 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to reset the featherboard. Now you notice this thing is trying to pull me. I'm going to caution you on that again. See that? Now this isn't the fault of the bit. It's the design of the bit, but there's no other way to make it, to cut. So I'm going to tighten this featherboard up really good and snug on here. All right. Now I'm not as smooth as I'd like to be, but I had an issue. So now I'm down to where I want and I'm good. Now these take a fair amount of sanding, no matter what you do. So all of that will sand up and clean up pretty nice. So we're going to be okay. And we've got a nice little 1/4 inch reveal. Now we're going to come back and we're going to put this on the top part of the crown. And we'll be good. All right. Now one thing, I want to go back to that router bit. Okay, you certainly noticed that thing's trying to pull. And just be careful. And the other thing is I was probably taking a little too heavy a cut there. If I'd have reduced the cut, I wouldn't have had as much grab on that, so that was my fault. Don't you do that. Now, what I want to do is I want to create this. So when I cut my crown, I'm going to be cutting the crown and the top. Now the reason I like doing that is that means I don't have to worry about cutting this crown on an angle. I can simply, I'll be cutting it on an angle, but I don't have to worry about, putting this in, leaning it up against the fence on a chop saw or something. This way I'm able to cut it using a flat, straight surface. Now what I'm telling you is, see, I have an indexable surface here that's straight. So this is just this is a straight 45 cut. Now, I have a 12-inch chop saw or miter saw, and it will allow me to make this cut. But the height on this is 3 inches. That puts it right at the maximum height that you're going to be able to cut on a table saw. And I'm not sure what a 10-inch chop saw will do. If you don't have a means of cutting something like that on an angle, then don't do this step yet. Because we can certainly cut one piece, then the other. Okay? But if you notice on this, there's a little reveal right here. It's a little step in here. The edge of the crown doesn't come right to the edge of that profile on the molding. But we want to get that straight. Now the way I do that is I simply use a marking gauge. And I want about a 1/4 inch reveal. Maybe not quite a quarter, but that's close enough. So then I'm just going to mark it. Now I could mark it from the front surface as well. Okay, you don't have a marking gauge, right? That's okay. Take your table saw blade and set it as low as you can get it, where it just barely makes a scratch. Simply put it through and let it make your scratch here, because your molding is actually going to be covering it. Now you're not even on camera going to be able to see this little scratch line. It's just a little cut line. Okay? But what that's going to do is that's going to allow me now to come back and mount and glue my piece in place. But I'll tell you what, on Tiger Maple, you take this much off, you can get a lot of flex. Okay, now I've got my back marked, and this is up. So my crown, this will be the up part of my crown, so I want to make sure I get that squared in there right. I think I've still got too much reveal there. All right, guys, I got my table saw blade set down to where it's barely even touching. and I set it up for my reveal. I need just the back edge right here will be my little scratch line, and I mean it's just a scratch. So we can go. Little glue, clamps. So I got this right. Now these things like to scoot around a little bit, so sometimes you got to play with them a little bit until the glue starts to pack just a little bit, and then it'll grab. I've also used a little pin nailer and pinned them a little bit when I had to. Now I'm having to kind of walk this down. It's on the line there. It's out here, so that's what I'm having to flex it around just a little bit. Just trying to pull away from my line here. And that's just purely, it's not that anything is cut crooked, that's just purely because we've taken some material off here and it's wanting to try to spring on us a little bit. This is where a pin nail would help. Down here's not. Don't you hate that? See, without that little scribe line, that's making sure you're straight. Because when we go to put this on the case, we want this back edge to be straight. Right here. We don't want it to set against our face and be off. That's what I want. Nice and straight across here. Exactly what I want. This end is still trying to give me a fit. This is one of those little 23 gauge pin nailers. Now, I know most of you guys don't have one. So just a little small finishing nail tapped in there. And you know what I do if I have to do that? If I don't have these, I'll tap it in just to hold it. Then I come back and pull it out and fill the hole instead of setting the hole. Because the glue is going to be sufficient to hold this. It's just trying to spring on me up here. Now the reason this thing's leaking air, because I stole the fitting out of it and didn't tighten it back. Alright. Got me where I want to be now. Can't move. Alright, let this dry a while. We're going to come back and get to work on our face frames.